All right, so we just talked about some sort of propeller. The Hamilton Standard Counterweighted Constant Speed Propeller. And the difference between this and the two position was what?
This one is governor.
Governor and? More positions. Has a wider range and a springy thing in there. Remember the spring? All right. What is this right here?
That looks like a zerk.
Is a grease zerk. It's on the bottom. It's right there. I can see it peeking out right there. It's grease zerk. All right. So as we go, I'm going to be bringing up this little chart, and we can see if you leave a whole bunch of spaces and you have a page, you can fill out a chart like this too. And hopefully it's correct. If it's not, we'll correct it. So we have a propeller. We have a Hamilton Standard counterweighted prop. Counterweights. Does it have counterweights? Yes, it does. What moves the prop to low pitch? Oil pressure. What moves the prop to high pitch? Counterweights and a spring. If I increase the speed or spring pressure, what happens?
Oil to the prop's going to decrease.
Underspeed, oil to prop, decrease pitch. Decrease speed or spring, oil, overspeed, oil, drain oil to increase pitch. All right, everybody got that? All right, you're going to see this again and again. So if you want to stop, and I can stop, you can take your pictures. There you go. All right, everybody's.
Sign it?
I can. Yes, I can. All right, next prop we're going to talk about is the Mccully Propeller. We're going to talk a lot about different propellers. And I don't really think under any circumstance am I going to ask you something so specific about the Mccully prop did this, where the Hartzell did that. It's mostly going to be a lot of the same. Does this one have counterweights?
No.
Doesn't have counterweights. So if it doesn't have counterweights, it's probably going to go on what kind of singular? It's going to go on a single. Probably going to be, the fixed force is going to be centrifugal twisting force, and that's going to make the blades go to low pitch. And what is going to make it go to high blade angle? High oil pressure. We could probably just call it a night, couldn't we?
Yeah.
All right.
You are going to call this out, right?
Yeah, but it's going to kind of go through all those until we get all the way down here to that. So there's quite a few. So that's up to you. All right. So there's the inside of it. So what do we got going on the inside here? On the inside, things you're going to be looking for. Yeah,
Are you going to ask about the different hub designs?
I am now. No. A little bit, yeah, a little bit. What he's trying to do is trying to figure out if he can get away with not having to read a bunch of stuff here for his oral, huh? All right, so here's the inner workings of it. We have bearings along here because we have a lot of force trying to move this propeller out and ripping it out of the hub. What force is that?
Centrifugal force.
Centrifugal force. We have, it's a little difficult to see here, but you can see the orange line. So the outside, that is the piston dome on top. And inside of it, we have a piston that's going to go back and forth. And as that piston goes back and forth, it's going to be pushing on for what I do not understand. I'm not the engineer, but these phenolic blocks. Anybody know what phenolic is? Phenolic is something you see a lot in aviation. It's it's an insulator. It's kind of it's a fibrous, almost like wood, but stronger than wood in some respects. But it's similar to a plastic, if you will. So why all of this metal, and then they put these two plastic pieces in here. And so when you are actually working with this propeller out in the lab, you will notice that these plastic pieces are in fact broken. So I don't know why it wasn't made out of aluminum. Nobody asked me. And what's inside here? You see that? Got a big spring in there. So we know right now, we can look at just looking at it, we know that we have three forces. We have a fixed force, which is centrifugal twist force, and then we have the variable force, which is oil pressure, and we also have a spring in there. Okay. Yeah.
I have a question. Some of
That's probably why you raised your hand. That's usually what that means here in the States. Go ahead.
Anyways, books, some of the Mccully, they have a dye penetrant in the oil.
We're going to talk about that.
And I was wondering, since the oil is basically circulating through the engine,
No.
how would it...
Okay, so we're going to talk about this later, but there's two different chambers here. And there's this chamber up in here where oil is going to be from the engine. This chamber does not have engine oil.
Okay, I got
This is completely separate. All right, so where are we at? 3. I'm going to put a header up here because right now we're going to be talking about not blue. Non-counterweight, non-feathering props. All right, so everything we're going to talk about until I say otherwise is that. Mccully prop. All right, the prop design. Mccully's a very popular system. I don't know why I'm writing this, but popular. Probably because we talked about compers and that wasn't very popular. So popular system used on many different light and medium-sized general GA aircraft. General aviation aircraft. There are 2 different designs. This is where it starts to get, for me, scary when you start thinking about buying an aircraft. Sometimes, well, you can see aircraft for sale, and Tyler can probably speak to this one even better than I can. You can see 2 aircraft that are nearly identical, and the price difference is just off the chart one way and off the chart the other way. And like, why? Why are they so different? And it gets down to a lot of it has to do with radios and instrumentation, but then other things come into play like time sense overhaul and then what kind of propeller it has on it, because these things are so dang expensive. So 2 different types. There's the threaded type. And the threaded uses a threaded retention nut to hold threaded retention nut to hold the blade into the hub. And the other type is the threadless. This is the modern design. With a higher TBO. What's TBO mean? Time between overhaul. And it uses split retainers to hold the blade into the hub. Well, let's see if we can take a look. Oops, wrong button. Run current slide. And you go away. And because now I remember to do this. Well, let me see. What do we got here? Well, I see a split retainer. a retaining ring in there. And I don't see any threads at all. So that would tell me that's the modern threadless. All right, let's go back a slide. Let's see what we got here. Can't really see the side of that one. Ah, there we go. Which kind do you think this is? Hey, what made you think that? All the threads in there. All right, so this is the old style threaded. Here's that phenolic block. Got your bearings. All right, remember this is where the oil is going to be up in here. So it's going to come down the center through that hole right there and fill this area. This area back in here is not full of engine oil. I feel like we've already seen this one. What type is that one? Threadless. All right, I'm going to move this. You all right, Justin? No? Negative. All right, so we're going to... Can you want to do that? Just going to chill out here. Hannah's going to tell us an interesting story while we wait.
I was on this lobster boat before I moved out here because I was like, I'm not gonna be back for a while.
Oh, please tell me when you say it was a lobster boat, it was a boat shaped like a big lobster.
No, dang it wasn't. But I went out on this lobster boat and I was sailing around. We were going out to they have these marker buoys, and each lobster crew or ship or whoever has got their license to go look for lobsters, they have their own buoy design that they have registered with the state. And so you see some that are, blue and yellow stripes or whatever, but the stripes are very coveted, I've been told.
No.
But we get to the first crate and they haul it out of the water, and this guy, he's like all decked out in his like
Slickers.
Slickers, yeah. And he pulls it up on deck and he looks in the cage. He says, "Well, nothing there. Welcome to fishing," and he throws it back in.
That was the best story ever. And boy, if you thought that my lectures were bad. All right, so what are my fixed forces?
That's what the wake you up your students online.
Yeah, it was, yes. What are my fixed forces?
Centrifugal twisting.
Centrifugal twisting. And
The
spring.
spring.
Spring pressure to, I use the word drive. I hope that works. Drive prop to what? Help me out here. Low pitch. Is pitch the right word? Loaded blow blade angle / high RPM. All right. That means that uses governor. Uses governor oil pressure to drive prop. To what? All you gotta do is the opposite. High blade angle / low RPM. So if I were to lose this, control the prop, it's going to automatically want to go to.
Low blade angle, high
All right. Low blade angle, high RPM. Blades are installed into the hub and rotate on large ball bearings. Blades are installed in the hub. Installed in the hub and rotate on large ball bearings. Oops. I know, that's why I said oops. An internal piston rides inside of a cylinder. And the piston is connected to the blades through an actuating link. So the piston is connected to the blades. Actuating link. That makes sense. Piston is connected to the blades via an actuating link. I like that better. It's shorter. Well, as the piston moves, the blade actuating link rotates. As the blade actuating, let me see. Picture's worth way more. All right. So laser pointer. As the piston right here, and what's this black thing?
O-ring.
Yep, O-ring seal. All right, got to keep the oil on the side. So as this moves, we have the blade actuating link is going to come down through here, and it's going to press on this pin. This pin is driven on the back side or the blade of the blade right here. So this is part of the blade, and as that pushes down, it's not in the center of the blade; it's off sides of the blade.
Kevin,
Yep,
are those
pins like that.
rectangles on the end of the blades?
Rectangles on the end. Oh, right here.
Yes. Are those for balancing? No.
I don't know. I'm not sure why they're there. I think there's spacers in there. I don't actually know. Sorry. But this pin is off center. It's not in the center, it's off center. So when that pushes on that, it rotates the blade back and forth. That's its function. Connected blades via an actuating link. Let's see. I have as the piston moves, the blade actuating link rotates. A blade actuating pin installed on the butt end of the blade rides on the inside the actuating link, and as the link rotates, it causes the blade to rotate. Do you want me to write that? All right. Guess I'm getting lazy. Let's see, high and low pitch. Stops are internal. So the high and low pitch stops are actually what stop the blade at the high angle and the low angle. So if the blade stop is internal, it goes to a very flat angle, and I run up the engine and it goes over red line. What do I have to do to correct that? Take it apart and
Sometimes there's a little.
lose your license. You should be taking apart props in the field?
Send it off.
I would not. Well, so you're off by a couple RPM. You're going to take it off and send it out and have them open it up. You want to do that? We got to find some other way to adjust the RPM.
Change the blade.
Can't adjust the blade angle because the stops are internal.
Just on your governor?
Ah, thank you. Adjust it where?
On your governor.
Governor stop screw. So as you adjust the governor stop screw, it'll adjust the speeder spring tension. It'll only bring the prop to a certain point. Now, The thing you have to be careful with is if you're limiting your red line on an internal stop, you have a physical stop and the blade can only go so far. If you're using a governor to stop that, can the blade go a little bit flatter than you wanted it to? Say yes. So if you are really fast with the throttle and bring it up fast enough, before the governor can react, that blade's going to go all the way flat. It's already flat. The governor oil pressure hasn't brought it off its stops yet. So if it's all the way flat and you're really fast with that throttle and bring it up really quick, what are you going to see? Overspeed right past red line until the governor can kick in and bring it back. So you can bring it up slow. I guess unless it's not your plane. If it's a rental, I don't know, you do what you want. Oops, that's that. All right, some props. We're still talking about the Mccully here. Are completely sealed with the exception of spiral pins, exception of venting spiral pins. And a spiral pin's like a roll pin, and a roll pin, I'll try to picture. Trying to think, have you guys encountered roll pins on anything? It's really just, it's a hollow pin. I'm going to draw something, I mean nothing to you. It's a hollow pin made out of steel, and it has a split at one point. And the reason for these pins usually is you can drive them into something and they'll close up and fit in a smaller space, and that gives it the tension to stay put. So sometimes you'll see them driven through a shaft and a castellated nut when the castellated nut is really not supposed to come off normally, so you'll put it in there. But they have these spiral pins. There's two of them. They're stuck in the prop, and they're pretty small, and they give some venting to the inside of the hub. I was going to say that shouldn't be there. If that is the case, and always check your manual. I'm going to say this over and over again. No field lubrication is possible because there's no way to do it. And some props are filled with dyed engine oil. Why do you suppose they would fill it with dyed engine oil?
Or dye pen if easy inspection.
Dye pen. It's like a permanent dye pen. So dye pen, for you haven't had 300, dye penetrant inspection. What it is, it's a dye that can actually, if there's a crack, it's going to seep out of the crack and indicate a crack, because original dye penetrant inspections were actually just used with dirty oil. So dye leak. Dye leak indicates a crack or failed seal. There we go. And when this is the case, there's almost always a sticker on there that says this hub is internally lubricated with red dyed oil, which is independent of engine lubricating oil system. And best picture I could find, you start to get a little red seep out of there. This could be either crack or a failed seal. And so that's what you look for. Yeah.
Can you explain again what's the danger of over lubricating the propeller?
All right.
I think you mentioned.
Yeah, it really doesn't apply to this one. And I'm going to get into it later as we go, but since we're kind of here and you're asking, what's the danger of over lubricating your propeller? I've witnessed over time a real change in how propellers were lubricated. And when we start getting into some of these other ones, they have grease zerk fittings on it. Let's see if I can find one here. I don't even think I have a good picture of it. No, sorry, I don't have good pictures of grease zerk fittings. But anyway, we can go back to we just use this one as an example. And so on a lot of propellers, you have these grease zerk fittings up, and there's 2 of them, or 4 of them often. Be one here, and then one opposite that on this blade, and then one here, and one opposite that on this blade. So these grease zerk fittings are designed so that you would grease the propeller. And at one point, the procedure was you would take out a grease zerk. So let's say I'll take out this bottom one, and you would put your grease gun on this, and you would pump the grease gun until you got nice clean grease out of the bottom of the other one. Then you come over here and pull out a grease zerk, and you do the same thing. You pump a bunch in there and get it out. And that's really changed. I don't see that so much anymore as what I've been told in the last seminar I went to and some of the newer manuals. They don't want you to do that. What they want you to do, and yeah, you can take out the plug because that vents it, but you only put in like 3 pumps a year. And the reason why, and I don't have it in front of me, but the prop can only hold so much grease. And once you've filled it full of grease and it really has nowhere to go, and this whole idea of flushing it through, I don't want you to do that anymore. They just, the way it is the grease just kind of, I don't know what exactly happens to it. It stays in the hub, and that's the problem. And so you're only supposed to add a little bit. So if you were to actually over-grease the prop, it has to come out apart for a clean and reseal. So they take it all apart, clean out all the old nasty grease, and of course it's subject to all the service bulletins, airworthiness directives, and everything else. So you have to be very careful, and you also have to use the exact right grease called for in the maintenance manual. Sometimes there's even a sticker on it that tells you exact grease. I can't really overstress that greasing a prop can lead to a lot. You don't want to not do it, trust me. But doing it incorrectly can instantly lead to a prop overhaul that your company be paying for, because the customer is going to say, well, my prop was fine. It wasn't a problem until you put the wrong grease in it. Then it had to go in, and then they found all these problems, and I am not paying for it. So you have to be very careful. Use the right grease. We really haven't gotten into grease so much in this class, but the difference is there's so many different greases out there, and you have to be extremely careful which one you use. Props are just very, very picky and finicky. I put those words together. Items. In fact, even the torque on them is so precise that when you get a prop back from the prop shop, it will have a little tiny cup, looks like something you might get like lip balm on, little tiny cup, and it's the grease that goes on the bolts to torque this back on. And you don't mess with that stuff. You got to do it exactly perfectly. Well, I always say that. I'm sure there's people out there that don't do anything exactly perfectly and it works, but that's the forgiving nature. But anyway, so you don't want to pack these things full of grease. The other problem with grease is grease has a lot of weight to it. And if I put a whole bunch of grease on this blade and not so much on this blade, I'm going to have an out of balance propeller. And that's going to cause problems. So I tell you all that, and then I tell you, who has any experience with a grease gun in here? Well, what's your opinion of grease guns?
They're a messy pain in the ass.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I've never seen a grease gun I like. In fact, I get so sick and tired of a grease gun. Every time you go to do it, it's like
it's out.
It's out. It's got an air in it. And these things you're supposed to put like 3 pumps in exactly. Come on, And so I got so mad. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to, got to the point in my life where I'm going to get a good grease gun. I'm going to get a good aircraft one. And, you can buy them really cheap down at Harbor Freight, but I don't want a cheap Harbor Freight one. I want to pay the big bucks, and I got one from Aircraft Spruce.
The same thing.
Same thing. It's the Harbor Freight brand.
They picked it up from Harbor Freight.
Yep. Tripled the price, sold it to an idiot like me. So, but it does work. I'll say that. Anyway, so yeah, I hope that answered your question. Yeah. You just stretching, or do you have another story to tell?
She was going to tell you about the second time she went on.
We're saving that for another day. All right, so dye leak indicates a crack or a failed seal. So if you see red coming out of your prop, then you have a problem. All right, let's talk about the governor for this thing. Governor. Well, we talked about the Hamilton standard. I don't know if I want to. Same as the Hamilton standard, but works in the opposite manner. I don't think I want to write that. But I write oil pressure is released to, and you fill in the blank, to do what?
Increases blade.
Decrease the blade.
Decrease.
Oh, release.
Yeah, release. And let's see. Pressure release to decrease blade angle. Oh, we should write this. Centrifugal twisting force plus spring to low pitch, high RPM. And let me see, oil pressure to prop for high pitch, low RPM. Governor control arm. I want to be careful I write this because the control arm is spring loaded to high RPM. And that's just, I need a picture. Don't have one. That's just saying that if the control cable from the cockpit to the governor were to break, there's a spring wound on the outside of the governor arm, just like you saw on the throttle for the Marvel Shoveler, that in case you lost the control, it wants to spring load it to high RPM, or on the carburetor, yeah, high RPM. You can do the same thing. Control arm spring loaded to high RPM. So if you lost the control cable, it's a spring, just going to wind this thing, make it go to high RPM. Setup and adjustment. I already warned you about taking props off. What's the first thing you need?
Bucket.
5-gallon bucket, because you got to catch the oil and
Drain the prop.
drain the prop. Also, and I was reading in this book I was talking about by James Reason, and they were going over. It was a Pratt and Whitney and somebody else. They did this statistic, and they were gathering what were, for lack of a better term, basically the stupid things that happened, the human factors and causation. And one of the huge causations for engine shutdowns in flight and reasons for disassembly after overhaul was things left in an engine. And I've known mechanics who have left rags in engines, destroyed a rag. One of the seminars I went to with the prop shop, they had pictures, brand new prop was installed in the field, and you already know where I'm going with this. They call up, hey, you guys overhauled my prop, my mechanic put it on, the thing doesn't work, barely, it's super sluggish, okay, well, can you bring it in? Yeah, I'm on the field, I'll taxi it over. Taxi it, tug it over. They pull the prop off to take it over to the bench to, figure out, what did we do to it? Why isn't it working? Get the prop off, put it in the bucket, and like, oh, there's a big old rag shoved in the front of the crankshaft. Why was a big old rag shoved in the front of the crankshaft? Stop the leak. Yeah, well, if you get, so, and I've seen that. It happens more. I remember troubleshooting a vacuum pump with somebody one time. Brand new engine, just installed it. The vacuum pump, man, just troubleshoot. Can't figure it out. Well, finally, let's just take the thing off and all the lines. I pulled it off, and there's one of those red plugs, just right there. So that happens. Be careful with that. Setup and adjustment. Okay, lubricate. Should I pull rag out of the crankshaft first here? Don't forget to lubricate the O-ring before installing. What O-ring am I talking about? Well, I've never really showed you a picture of this O-ring, but it's because the O-ring I did show you is in the piston that's going up and down. We don't work on those as mechanics. The prop shop did that, but when you get the prop back, it's going to have to go onto the crankshaft, and the crankshaft has that little pilot flange that comes out. You have the flange, you have a little pilot that comes out, and the prop has to go over that. So inside of the propeller, there's an O-ring. So make sure there's an O-ring in there. A lot of times it's not in there. It's a little baggy. And so you lubricate the O-ring before installing. Shouldn't have to say this, but I will. Use proper torque and safety wire. Where am I going to find the proper torque for this propeller?
Airframe.
The propeller manual.
I got propeller manual.
Airframe.
I got airframe manual.
Engine manual.
I was waiting for somebody to say it. I like prop manual the best. Followed by airframe, never engine. I don't think I've ever seen that in there. That is just, that's, at that, an engine you have to think of it as an accessory to the airframe. So that would, those two wouldn't go together. So what if I cannot find it in either the prop manual or the airframe manual?
43.
All right, 4313. Yes? Okay, if you can't find it in the airframe or prop manual, look harder. Do not go to 4313. Not on these constant speeds. It's there. It's somewhere. And if you absolutely, completely, totally can't find it,
All the manufacturer.
call the prop shop. Get them to fax you the page. Don't let them tell you what it is. Can you fax me that, please? You know what they're going to say?
Sure.
They'll say, yeah, that's it. A what? How about I just email it to you? All right. Adjust high RPM. Stop. Screw. Where am I going to find that high RPM stop screw? On the governor. Troubleshooting. Pilot says it goes to low blade angle very quickly, but boy, it's real. I have a hard time bringing it out of low blade angle. In fact, I've got to have very high RPM on the engine in order to do it, much higher than it used to be. What do you suppose?
Sludge.
Yeah, it's sludge in the crankshaft. Why sludge in the crankshaft? It's not sending oil. So if it's not sending oil, where's the prop want to be naturally? Yeah, so that's pretty good. So sludge in there. What about getting a wear between the bearing or transfer collar? Again, so my theory, my explanation was it low pitch, because that's where it wants to be. Very sluggish and won't go to high pitch, and you have to have high RPM. Why would I have to have high RPM? Because I got to spin the snot out of the governor to get it to work. I need a lot more pressure, I need more volume to go through, so it's not working. So I got a plug, which was maybe sludge, or
Low capacity of oil pump.
the governor could be wearing out. But it's kind of funny. All of these things have nothing to do with the prop. So prop's pretty much got, one moving part. Piston goes back and forth, which makes a blade. That's 3 moving parts. All right. So just remember loss of oil pressure. Loss of oil pressure will result in low blade angle.
It is also can be relief valve.
Could be a relief valve problem in the governor. Yep.
You can adjust from
Threaded design has balance weights on the blade retention nuts. So we have to remember that threaded design has balance weights on blade retention guess that's just more of a point. And let me see, threadless has balance weights around the cylinder. So the prop should come to you statically balanced, but you may want to dynamically balance it, which is something that is actually done quite often. And let me see here. I know we've got thread and threadless. See if we can figure out the threaded design. See those screws right there? So you can attach weights to those screws. And threadless, no, it doesn't really show up. It has just, be looking at it and there's just, for some strange reason, there's two threaded holes. And you're like, yeah, about that, about that far apart, 1.5 inches apart or so. And like, wonder why they're like that. And that's why it's like that. These can be a lot, I'm going to tell you, a lot of fun, this style, to safety. Some of these, these are, I actually use that pin. I'll have to show you in the lab. But these are castellated nuts with like that spiral pin going through it. So it's really just a bolt. They make it into a bolt, and you have to actually get safety wire through here, up and around and over there. And not only do you have to torque that, but it's a project that I'll let you do in a second here. I kind of set it up, but it's really a pain in the butt, and it takes kind of special wrenches and crow's foots to get in there, and that's all I'll say about that. All right. So that's the Mccully. Mccully, non-counterweighted, non-feathering. I'm going to spell it so you can actually read my writing. Hartzell. H-A-R-T-Z-E-L-L. Yep. Z-E-L-L. Hartzell props. All right, prop designs. How many do we have for the Mccully? Two, but they really look very, very similar. So we just had how the blades are retained. But it makes a big deal if you're buying one. Which one do you want, the threaded or the threadless? Threadless, okay. Two types. Have the steel hub prop. And the steel hub they're easy to see, has exposed operating mechanisms. Or the compact. And honestly, don't try and figure out which one is the smallest and call it the compact. It's much easier. Remember, one has exposed operating mechanism, because to me, the compact looks bigger than the steel. The steel actually has a smaller hub on it because everything's external. So has no exposed operating. Now, let's hope I have a good picture of that. So I can say, see, that's what I meant. Oh, forgot to do that. So let's do that before we move on. So the Mccully. Was this one counterweighted? No, not the one we're talking about so far. So prop moves to low pitch because centrifugal twisting and spring pressure. What moves the prop to high pitch? Oil pressure. And then we have the speeder spring. Steel hub. and compact. See, so the compact, which one looks bigger? Compact. Compact's all fatter. So everything is internal. But then the steel, you can have these rods that are going to come down here, so you can see all the external rods and this move back and forth. So we have good examples of both of these across the street. So that's why I say look for the exposed operating mechanism and the exposed operating mechanism. There you got your steel. And by the way, you could always look at that, and it's made out of aluminum. And we have very special aluminum steel indicator tools. Christian, you want to talk about those?
It's just a magnet, Kevin.
It's just a magnet. All right. Oops, what else we got here?
How long were we in line at the total for that?
Sorry about that.
All for a man. That James guy.
All right. Well, let's talk about some stuff. But like this, before we do that, why don't we
What?
talk about tomorrow?
Oh, man.